Hi, everybody. Tonight I have the pleasure to talk to you about UN budgets and more specifically about what conversion rates are used for UN budgets. First of all, why do UN organizations use conversion rates? That is because they are active all over the world and they spend their money in general two major currencies, namely in dollars and another part in euros. That's the money that they actually have in the bank. Member states, they have to decide how they're going to spend this money. And for that, they need a written budget that they can discuss. And it's too difficult to discuss a budget with two currencies in it. So they ask the organization to present a single currency budget, namely in dollars. And to do that, you need to convert the euros into dollars. And the question I would like to raise is, what conversion rate should the UN use? There are two approaches to this. The first one is the UN operational exchange rate. The major characteristic of this is that it fluctuates. It fluctuates because it follows the market value of the euro and the dollar. Because as you know, the values of currencies change daily on the currency market, and in order to stick to that reality, the UN operational rate sticks to that, and therefore it's a conversion rate that fluctuates, not daily, but monthly, to not make it too fluctuating. The advantage of this is that you obtain a realistic budget because you convert your euros into dollars according to a conversion rate that reflects the reality of the market. But the disadvantage is that it's confusing. Why is it confusing? Because if you change your budget presentation every month, it is difficult to determine, to check whether the organization is in deficit or not. Let me explain this. A UN budget runs over 2 years. At UNESCO, that's the case. So we're currently in the 2016-2017 biennium. At the beginning of the biennium, the organization determines what activities it's going to implement during this biennium, and it calculates how much they cost in euros and in dollars. And this adds then up to the spending commitment for the whole biennium. Well, this means that if the organization commits on day one to spend 10 euros somewhere on a program, that might be presented as $12 according to the conversion rate that is valid on day one, the UN operation rate. But if these 10 euros are actually spent a year later, then the UN operational rate will have changed and it might be different. And that means that these same 10 euros might be presented as not $12 but $13. And that means an overspending of $1, a deficit of $1. And that is not what you want. So this is confusing. Of course, you could say that, you could argue that this is only a presentational reality. Yes, but even in the presentational reality, meaning the budget that we discuss, it needs to be clear simply for the decision makers if the amount that they committed to, which is presented in dollars, is actually spent or not, meaning did we spend more or less than what we committed to? And this rate makes that difficult. Now there's a way to solve that, and that is by using not a fluctuating rate but a constant dollar rate. The idea is as follows. Instead of using a conversion rate that changes every month, the organization decides to use a constant dollar rate and keep it the same during all the biennium. For example, $1 equals 0.869 euros. That is the rate that UNESCO currently uses. That means that if the organization commits to spending 10 euros during the biennium on a specific program, in that budget that will be presented as $11.51. but it will be presented again in this amount, $11.51, during all of the biennium. So it doesn't matter when you spend it and how you present it, because it will always be presented as $11.51. So both on the moment where you commit to spending it and both on the moment where you spend it. So it's very easy to see whether you spent too much or not. So the advantage is that it's clear. Very important in accounting. In accounting, you need to see where you stand. But the disadvantage is that the budget is not totally realistic, because if you keep the conversion rate constant, then the dollar amount that you convert the euro amount to does not necessarily reflect the actual value of the euro, because in the real world, in the economic world, the value, so also the conversion rates, they change. But there's a but to that. The but to that is that it's okay as long as you make sure that this constant dollar rate is not too different from the UN operation rate, from the market rate, let's say. I mean, what you do here is you accept to deviate a little bit from the economic reality, and because you don't want to change with the economic reality, which changes all the time. And what you get in return is a budget that is very clear, that tells you on each moment whether your spendings are below or over your commitments. So that is a good choice. It's an easier and clearer choice than this one. Next question is, how do you make sure that this constant dollar rate stays as close as possible to the market rate? You do that by checking in between biennia, so after the biennia is over, if the constant dollar rate that you have been using is still in line or close enough to the conversion rate that is used on the market. And if it's not the case, then you adjust it. If you do that, then your situation stays safe. This brings us to the situation of UNESCO, because in UNESCO, the constant dollar rate, this one, has not been changed for 20 years, since 1996. And that gives us a situation, and it's presented here, in which the budget presentation, this one, is not very realistic. Look at this graph. The real value of the dollar, or the UN operation rate, changes. Sometimes it's high, sometimes it's low. But UNESCO always used the constant dollar rate, which is this value. $1 always is equivalent to €0.869. That means that in 2001, the dollar was high and mechanically the euro was low. But UNESCO presented its euros as if it was worth more, as if the euros they had in the bank were worth more dollars than they were actually worth. This is not very realistic, and this is not very good, because that's the conclusion of the French Cour des Comptes, who is the external auditor of UNESCO. They say that is not good accounting, because if you account that way, if you keep your books that way, you don't have a budget that shows the member states how much money they, or how much value, how much purchasing power they really have in the bank. Now, what does UNESCO do about that? This is the end of my story. As we get close to 2017, to December 2017, at the end of the biennium, UNESCO will ask member states, do you want to adapt the constant dollar rate to the market rate? And if at that moment this constant dollar rate is too far off the currency values or the conversion rate of the market, then member states will probably say, yes, we want to adapt it, we want to change the constant dollar rate, because we want our budget to be realistic. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to pay more or less, because no matter what conversion rate you use, the money that you have in the bank will stay the same. The only thing that changes is the dollar amount in which you present it. But member states always pay their contributions in two currencies. They receive two bills, one bill in dollars and one bill in euros. So it doesn't make them richer or poorer. It just gives them a budget presentation that is more realistic when they accept to adapt the constant dollar rate to the rate that is used on the market. I hope you like these explanations, and if you want to learn more about international organizations, you can follow me on Twitter via Oosterenvan, and I wish you a very pleasant evening.